everybody. Welcome to Up Close and Personal. And actually, we have a special guest tonight. His name is Billy Yates. And actually, before we dive into the episode, I wanted to go ahead and update everybody about what's going on. So, actually, this is the last week that we're going to be producing content, at least for the week. As most of you know, we're trying to organize a nationwide protest called the National Day of Action to End Violence and Genocide on Transgender People that is occurring on October 1st. I again, please encourage everyone to please organize in their state, have everybody show up, because right now we must end the attacks that is going on the transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming communities. I apologize, I cannot talk. I'm going to blame Monday. Okay, anything that goes wrong, Monday is going to be blamed. So, so let's just go dive right in, Billy. If you don't mind, just sharing anything about anything that you want the audience to know, just go ahead and share that.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Billy, he, him. And I guess I'm going to be talking, thank you all first for having the space. But, this intersection between queer organizing and labor organizing, which I think is really relevant to, everything. We're living in the middle of like a labor resurgence right now, not just in the US, but around the world. It's a pretty historic time on that level. At the same time, as you mentioned about that October 1st day, is like there's a round of attacks that are nothing new, but, we could look and find the same language that was used before. And they're doing this again, and it's this latest round. And so, I'm really happy to be part of helping, wherever I can help in that and support. But I do think that there's some related things to this, and there's some really interesting things that are happening right now that cover like kind of both areas, both the LGBTQ organizing and labor organizing as well. But so my name is Billy. I am the U.S. director for the Pay Your Workers campaign, which is a campaign of unions and labor organizations supporting garment workers. Led by garment worker unions in Cambodia and India, Sri Lanka. And they are demanding that the brands sit down and negotiate directly with workers. So during the pandemic, a lot of the things that were already not good in some of these countries in terms of manufacturing, in terms of labor rights, got worse. I think we saw this happen in the United States as well, where billionaires became bigger billionaires, and the rest of us had to deal and, mutual aid, people not getting evicted, all of this stuff. So it's like all of this exacerbated on another level in these other countries. And so the workers in these countries are demanding that they're paid back money that they're owed from the pandemic. So brands already, that make billions of dollars a year saw this as an opportunity to make more money off of workers. They used it as an opportunity to crack down on labor organizing. So in factories where workers were organizing, they decided not to reopen, even though the orders were back, because they want to go somewhere that's non-union. So this is a campaign that's an international campaign, and we are, I'm the campaign director for the United States, because the way that I kind of understand it is I come from a labor organizing background, in that we have the employer, which in this case is Adidas, who has stolen the money from the workers, who refuses to meet with the workers. And we have the garment worker unions who are demanding, that they get paid back and that they meet. So what is my role? What is our role in North America? It was like, we happen to be the key market for this brand. So workers have leverage in the factory. They can, they can do a work stoppage. They can go on strike. They can do all these things. It's hard against the big multinational corporation. But when we use our leverage here in the US and we combine it with their leverage and we link our actions, so we'll be having a global week of action at the end of October, which will link, actions happening at the factory in Pakistan and in Cambodia and in India at the same time, where we're going to be shutting down stores in New York, LA, Berlin. So we can connect this, in order to take on a big global corporation, we have to organize globally as well. So that's really my role, as I'm not one to say what the workers need. The workers can say what they need. My role is to push the brand, who is extremely interested in making money off of our market, to meet with the workers, and the workers can negotiate whatever they want. And Actually, it might be a good segue there because, yeah, one of the key markets for Adidas is, you know, they're trying to find more people who are not necessarily like athletic. It's like a lifestyle brand, and that, you know, sports is this way for people from different backgrounds to come in, and so it's really, there's a lot of heavy marketing to the LGBTQ community, um, including sponsorship of, you know, like famous, like Tom, what's his name? Who's the diver?
Tom Daly.
Tom Daly, yeah.
Tom
So
Daly,
he is an Adidas sponsored.
Mm.
He's sponsored by Adidas. Ashlyn Harris, who is a soccer player, an out soccer player in New York. They really are looking for like these, um, you know, kind of queer athletes and celebrities, and trying to sponsor them and, you know, talk about, oh, how much we support the community, how much we support LGBTQ rights. Like in June, they had this Australian, you know, queer designer, and he designed like a pride shoe, right? So I mean, we've all seen this rainbow washing like extensively, but his whole thing was that it was inspired by Stonewall. And so like I have, you know, you're reading this thing about some guy selling you a product. And I think that's what I'm really interested in right now is like how to shift from the community feeling like we're a marketplace to sell things, and instead being like, how are we like workers organizing in solidarity with garment workers, because we know that there are queer and trans garment workers there who are dealing with these things under a big corporation, and the corporation does not exist, so we don't exist so we could just feed into that anymore. Like we have to stand for something, and yeah, we have to draw the line somewhere as well and say you can't rainbow all of this stuff at the same time from, you know, stealing from workers, disrespecting their labor rights, and all of these things. So that's all stuff I'm really interested in. I don't know if I should just keep.
I know. No, I just kind of like, you know, I sorry, I apologize. We are not being a very good host because I'm like, you know, so intrigued about what you were saying. So actually, what was going through my mind while listening to you was like, because okay, I live right in West Hollywood, of all places. So I was passing by this kind of like a huge bar restaurant, you know, kind of very popular joint on Santa Monica Boulevard today because I was on the way home and I pass by there all the time. And they have this like they have kind of like fencing like right like all around their dining area because they are just like they are, you know, facing a big street. And so that fencing, it's sort of like they use it as a billboard almost. So there's always like an advertisement of like a big, you know, brand logo and stuff. Like they wrap the fence around, you know. So it's like looking at that, and that reminded me of, I mean, you know, because it was not Adidas, but it was like one of these sporting, you know, athletic brand, and and I'm thinking that I don't know. I've been in West Hollywood for like nearly not quite 2 years, but 1.5 years now. You know, and I feel like this commercialism, you know, in West Hollywood has gotten really worse. You know, when I moved to LA, that was the year when I came out. You know, so and I, you know, I was like hanging out in West Hollywood, but I felt like 20 years ago it had different feel, you know. But it's like now it's all about kind of selling stuff, you know. I feel like we are always like being marketed to, and I don't know what, you know, how other people feel about that, but it's really not a good feeling for me, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say this is the thing that bothers me. First of all, I hate capitalism. For the record, I think it's garbage. It needs to go away or do something because it's killing a lot of people. But that always bothers me too, especially during Pride Month when they really like display the rainbow logos. Because at the same time, like places like, let's see, Amazon, they go and promote Pride. But then again, like I have stated this before, I actually saw a straight Pride flag that they were selling, and they promote transphobic authors and everything. It's like, you're not really an LGBTQ friendly place because you're still promoting all this garbage. And it's just like, enough with your performative allyship.
Yeah, I we're in a society where the small group of people will do everything they can to accumulate as much money and profit as possible and maintain power, right? And so these brands, I think if you look at what happened in June of 2020 with how corporations responded to Black Lives Matter, how corporations responded, and what it is now, and kind of these really performative things that are just so, actually dangerous, I would say, because I think what you're both saying. I think one of it is kind of, is it on, like, queer people have such a powerful legacy of organizing and building and being really revolutionary and doing all of these things under intense pressure, under intense discrimination, all of this. There's a legacy of that. We have something to be really proud about, actually, and that was from always going against the system that did not believe you should exist. And to be boiled down now, is like, do we just not know the history? Is it like, or is it people so comfortable now that it's just, or are we all just wrapped up in like consumerism stuff as well? But what I find like particularly jarring is for corporations, any corporation that wants to do the rainbow thing, you people don't, there's like a history of unions were one of the first organizations where queer people were able to get non-discrimination clauses so that they wouldn't be fired at work. It was through the labor movement that you could add sexual orientation to its non-discriminatory policy. These things happened union by union, and we enjoy certain things today, but we didn't see that it was like individual groups of queer and trans folks, working people who, like, when we want a contract, we want to make sure that we can't get fired for this. We want to make sure that we have a restroom because that's a human right. That's an OSHA guideline. In fact, it's health and safety. Let's talk about health and safety. Let's talk about the conditions of our work, because those conditions of our work reflect the bigger society. We spend 8 hours a day at work, a third of our lives. When we can make change at the workplace, that change always carries out to the rest of society. That's why, one, it's so exciting that there's a lot of organizing now, just because people are going through this process, a very political process. But I do think, like, man, if this is a great opportunity to go back and to think about like what we have, how we got it, who was the one doing it, because it was not the big corporations who were like, oh, we were just being really nice, like they came in when there was money there, right? So yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
the problem, though. People have forgotten about like the whole concept of pride in our history. It's sad. Like I went to Pride this year, and I could tell you, I have never seen it so corporate. Like, it was ridiculous. I didn't even want to be there. Like, they had surveillance vans with cops. They didn't have any type of like LGBTQ like booths. There was only one booth that actually attracted me to go to, which basically they were promoting the ideas like, hey, we need to stop the violence on trans lives. I went to that one. But most of the other ones, you saw Kaiser, State Farm, just every type of fucking corporation that was there. And it was just like, okay, like, this is definitely not Pride. And a lot of people have forgotten about like Pride and its history. How did we get here? We were getting attacked by police. Were corporations involved in that shit? No.
I think that, yeah, go ahead, Sukuru.
No, I just wanted to say, because to something that you were saying, Billy. It's true though. It's really exciting that, like, so for instance, like what's happening with the Starbucks labor union right now. Really the core. I mean, I would say actually, it'll be safe to say the core of Starbucks labor organizing is queer people, really, because I kind of heard that from, like, people inside.
Mm-hmm.
They were telling me like somewhere in between like 20% to 50% of their labor union members are queer. And it's so exciting to me that they are actually, since it's Starbucks, I mean, there's a brand name and it's a big, company. And since they are the workers who are fighting against this big brand name and big corporation, I think they are bringing the issues that they are dealing with, into a spotlight, for us to see. And so that's really exciting for me. Like, okay, so I heard about, and I was actually reading this article that was sent to me, from the by the labor organizer, the article on Vice, actually, talking about, Starbucks using sort of like a, threat,
Mhm.
essentially like threat tactic, to labor organizers, that if your store, becomes organized, both for union, your gender affirming care may be taken away, from your healthcare coverage. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was, this is the next level of union busting, right? Like this is very sophisticated and very high level where the brand is now using like this image and its progressive values and it's using it against people to speak up at their work and saying, and that, I worked as a union organizer for different nurses unions in New York and California. And this is and I was also a worker and I helped organize my workplace at a nonprofit as well. And doesn't matter which workplace I was at, you heard the same things. Managers and bosses will always say, you may lose this. The fact is right now they could all lose it. They could lose it without a contract. They could use it without a union because right now they have no rights at work, right? So like the fact is policies can change any single day at the whim of management, right? So I think that's one of the things it's like one of those triggers whenever you hear like a manager say, well, what's stopping them from doing it right now? You know what I mean? And so
Right.
the fact is you have nothing until it's in writing and a contract signed, because right now the boss has all the power. And the fact that they're using healthcare at this time, at this where the temperature is in this country is really disgusting. But it also shows, right? They're scared of these young queer identified organizers who are bringing up things and saying that they want to have a share in, a say in how things are run, which is really inspiring, considering, I mean, it's just like, it's all over the country now, but we had to go through this, fortunately, like people to get really politicized about work and what their lives are worth. If you've spent the last couple of years thinking about your mortality and how much your boss, especially if you're on the front line, how much you're worth, people are coming back to their work now and demanding more. And so, yeah, I think that intersection is super interesting. I also will say, it's not just Starbucks. I was on the negotiating team at Asian Americans Advancing Justice, which is like the largest Asian American nonprofit in the country, legal aid organization. We had a majority queer negotiating team, and it was never a plan that way. But I was just like, we're the organizers, and we're the ones who organize the social events in the office. Of course, we're the ones who are going to be doing this. I think there's a lot of leadership among queer people in the labor movement because you're fighting against your boss. And I think we fight every single day when we go outside. We fight all these other things. We fight amongst our families. It's not new that that things are a struggle. But it's also not new that doing collective things is how we survive. And so I think the concept of union organizing for queer folks, I think for me, it's always felt really close because it's collective. It's never just you by yourself. That there's safety in numbers is like something I learned as a queer person really early on, right? So we're like seeing these now in practice. And yeah, speaking up is hard, but you do it in all the other parts of your life also. So I think there's a natural tendency or just an observation I've had. But I will say it's pretty strong observation. I've been around a lot of labor people, and it's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and that is such an amazing thing, by the way, that more queer people are stepping up. Honestly, more people need to be using their voice. Like, we all need to be recognized. We're human beings. We're not just going to be your little price tags that you can just go and abuse at your job just because you need to fulfill demand.
Yeah, I mean, imagine, right? Imagine if we were the opposite, right? Imagine it's like, oh, you better treat your workers right, or the queer community is going to come after you because they believe that, solidarity with workers, because, you know what I mean? What if we were that? I think that's like the dream, right? Is like, how do we go from being this place that you can just market things to and has a disposable income? And it's interesting though, it is to a certain market of queer people, right? Like, There's the one, the idea that, oh, you're young, you don't have kids, you don't have all this stuff, despite reality. But there is a market geared towards that, and I wish we were the opposite, where it's like don't mess with people, or the queer community is gonna mess with you, and like because they're gonna that for me, I think is more of a community I'd like to be part of, and something I think that there's a hunger for too. So just to your point, Noah, about the pride. So I actually went to DTLA Proud, which is kind of, LA has like 20 prides right now.
Yeah.
I can't keep up, but one of them was one of them's in downtown Los Angeles, and I went there, and then a couple nights before, I was telling my friend, I was like, look, can we get some banners printed, like queers against Adidas, or like no pride in sweatshops. I was like, let's call it no pride in sweatshops. And having people take, kind of doing the reverse of the rainbow marketing, where it's like, take a picture with this pro worker sign that says queer and trans people support garment workers, like worker rights are queer rights, stuff like that. And it's like, let's use the rainbow this way, like let's use this rainbow to advance like something in solidarity with these workers. And the reception was pretty good. I mean, look, I also go to Pride, and I want to hang out and have fun, and I think there's always space for that. There were some people, though, and it was so interesting, who were like, yeah, I came here because I saw something, like people are aware of the rainbow washing. People are aware of the corporate stuff. People are aware of it, even if they don't always have the space to talk about it like we do today. I think people kind of just internalize it. It's like, oh, look, it's the new whatever they want me to buy because I'm gay, like stuff like that. But people have it on their minds. And I think right now we're at a time when people are like, there's an energy for the injustice of what corporations do on the daily basis by extracting wealth and the health of our planet for a very few amount of people. And I think connect those things, So I was pleasantly surprised. I also didn't have such high hopes. I think it's sometimes you just have to try things, but I'm really interested in trying this more and seeing, what is the, what language, like how can I meet people where they're at, in terms of how to get these ideas across, or like how to make these connections more relevant, whatever it is. I'm really interested because I do think that it's important. And I think there's a space for it too. So I've been thinking about it a lot.
I have to give it to you, Billy. You are such a creative organizer. Can we actually talk about I don't know if we can share, but can we just actually talk about that day, like when you launched Adidas global campaign, because it was Adidas' birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of this comes from, I think, when you're a student, you can be, depending on the context, right? But you have like control over an institution. It's one of the few times in your life where it's like, this institution works for me. I pay tuition. The whole purpose of this, theoretically, is what they say, right, is to educate people. And so you have like leverage when your university has big contracts, or so when I was a student organizer, I ran campaigns on campus, and now that so I think I had a lot of time to kind of try out things, and it was always like, what's the worst, like, but at the same time, you're students, and it's like, oh, you're just a student anyway, so you can try stuff out. So it was always creative stuff, and it was like how to get this message across. So in LA, I had scoped out this building, like it was high security when I went by. This is like prime fashion district, like office retail. There's like a code to get in, like a thing. There's another glass. So I was like, I don't know if we're gonna get in. So we just brought a whole bunch of balloons and flowers, and we just walked in there, and I didn't know, no idea what's gonna happen, right? But just try it. Oh, and so they opened the door right for us, and the secretaries were like having the best day of their lives. I don't know. They were just like, hi, oh, you do this for us. Like, what's going on? And I was like, yeah, we're here. We want to talk to Adidas. And she said, oh, let me go get them. And I was like, this never happens. This never happens. So these secretaries are just like fawning over us. They're like laughing. We have all these balloons. They're like, everyone's kind of just like looking at each other. They're like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I was like, I don't know what's going to happen next either. But they bring out the Adidas lady. And you could see her face change really quickly. Like, I think she got it. When I mentioned the word garment worker, you don't talk about workers at Adidas. That's the last thing they want to talk about, right? And that this is a letter from the garment worker union. It's really important that they address this, that Adidas has stolen all this money. But it's a small, everything is always like, we are a small group of people and we try and look bigger than we are, I think, in organizing spaces. But yeah, no, and Adidas, they have it coming in so many different ways, but yeah, we got to try everything. And I think one my organizing mentor, who I check in with a lot, she organized me when I was a student, and she was telling me, we always think it's like, I think with we think it's like this chessboard, right? And it's like we have to be like really strategic and like one step, and like you're planning 5 events, like you're seeing all these things. She's like, sometimes it's more like checkers, or it's more like Connect Four, and you just got to try things, right, and see what sticks. But it's not all going to be like, oh, if I do this, then this is going to we have to be a little more creative and flexible, which, yeah. So that's kind of on tactic stuff.
Yeah.
First of all, I would have loved to have had that picture though, or have that video, like
I
just to
know.
see that facial expression, just like quickly be like, oh, and then like, I would have loved to seen that. Like, if anybody does use that approach, please make sure you take video and take pictures, because I would love to see it.
That was really fun. Yeah, I mean, I was glad I was there. Yeah, yeah. No, actually, I wanted you to talk about it because I was actually telling this about this to my uh Japanese friend of mine, and she was just so intrigued, and she was like, "Well, you have to write about that, or you have to, like, because um." She really thought that that kind of thing can give people ideas, because I think as organizers, globally, we are always looking for new ideas. And as you were saying, like, you talk about making things fun for people all the time, right? Because
Yeah.
let's face it, activism and organizing can be very tough. Sometimes it's just really not fun. It's a lot of work and people burn out. So I think it's really important to have fun ideas, so that just people are doing like important things, but sometimes like just the meaning is not enough. So to keep people engaged, and so what you do is just so important and so wonderful.
I really believe in the collective, not just saying that, but like when I think about everyone, how lucky we are. The whole like strength of diversity thing kind of is now like this cliche thing, right? But I think for organizing, it's like, wow, you have a different background, you have a different life. You're seeing this problem in a way I would never see it, just because. And maybe I've looked at this thing like 10 different times, and maybe that's why I'm never going to see it the same way you do. And I think that collective, if we can combine, it's like people of different ages, races, all these different backgrounds, identities, like that's how we win, because we have to outsmart and out organize brands, and they're getting paid. Some people are very comfortable getting paid lots of money to figure out how to keep workers down, right? So that's what we're up against. And so it's going to take like that creativity. Yeah, and I think that's the fun part though, right? Is like, I think it is also the fun part, because people have ideas, and you're gonna have a lot of bad ideas until you have a good idea too. But let's at least like be open to share them, because you never know. I really don't like working by myself. Like I've always worked with teams. Like I always need someone to like just run through ideas with, because in my head it may sound a certain way, and then I in reality it's like, actually that's a really bad idea. So I really appreciate like the collective, and I think that's our strength. Is like, how do we organize to build it so that the collective is like alive and like coming up with stuff and engaged. Yeah, it's a challenge though too, like we were saying. It's not like things are super easy right now, you know what I mean? Like these are not easy times, I think. And so it is, I had to take like most of, I take my weekend time pretty seriously. And you have to do those things as well. But yeah.
Yeah.
So that actually like leads me into a question though, because I've noticed this with trans activists. There's not like a shit load of trans activists, because they all experience this burnout. So like, what advice would you give? I mean, I know obviously making it fun helps, but like what kind of advice would you actually promote to future queer people that are out there that want to organize, but they're kind of like on the edge?
I think that it could be the most fun you ever have. I mean, is organizing with other queer people to do like really wild stuff that can have a big impact, and you get to make, like there's potential for that. And I think that's the fun that I've had in student organizing. Union organizing, when I was with the nurses, like we would dance on the picket line, we'd have music, we'd do line dancing on the picket line. There's a sense of joy in that as well. And I think about my community here in LA, and it's a mixed up bunch. But it's also like I do think people want to have like purpose in a way. And I think, when I was at Labor Notes, I was going to like a lot of the international sessions, because Labor Notes is this big conference with labor, workers. Like Starbucks workers were everywhere, Amazon workers were everywhere. And so I was there with two garment workers from Bangladesh, and I was kind of like their hype person. So I was like, explaining the campaign to people. And we were at a session, and this nurse from Spain who had beautiful blue hair was talking, and it was just like super eloquent. And I was just like, something about the way she talked, I was so interested in everything she was saying. And it was a question and answer time. And she was talking about, we need to build, what they're like, building a society where we treat people better. That's kind of what she was talking about. Her experiences during the pandemic as a nurse. And then it was question and answer time. And I asked, because for me, I thought I was organizing a strike for nurses in New York during 2020. So it was really a stressful time. Healthcare workers going on strike in Albany and upstate New York. And for me, I was like, why don't people get it? Like these are the frontline people. Like we have to support them. Why don't we have enough support? And why are the nurses like didn't feel like there was enough strength either? And it turns out you had to wait like 2 years later. Like now we're getting it, right? It was like, I thought it would happen 2 years ago. Like at the pandemic, everything seems so urgent to me. Maybe that's my personality, what I'm going through. But it really, I think we saw people die. We lost people. We lost parts of our lives. We lost things. And we lost some fear too. I feel like a lot of people lost some fear. And so it's now there seems to be this thing, but it looks like for me, it was delayed, and I was frustrating because I feel like if we would have been doing what we we're doing then now, it'd have been easier to get support. But all that's to say, and I asked the nurse, if she feels this too, like, are more people joining unions in Spain? And she explained, unions in Spain are a little bit different. And it's like, people are not looking to organize a union right now in Spain, but people are definitely looking for a place to belong. And it's just, you shouldn't need to explain anything more. I think everyone in the room got that, right? That people are looking for a place to belong. We are looking for a place that's, maybe I'm optimistic, but I think a lot of people are looking for a place to belong that is more meaningful than our lives before. Sometimes I feel like we've rushed all the way back again, and it's a little bit jarring and a whirlwind for me, because I remember when, in 2021, as we were getting our vaccines, I remember doing a lot more like one-on-one, like, oh, I get to see my friend for the first time. We're going to have lunch. Like, it's really special, and it's like, oh, that was like the event of the week. Now, and it's the weekend, I'm like, I got to go here and I got to go here. And and so I'm wary of it. I think I've noticed it. But I do think people are looking for a place to belong. And I think that, why I think being part of something where you belong and you like the other people is like a great part of being alive. So I think I don't know if that's the answer to burnout. I swim a lot. That's my other answer. That's my really quick answer. I joined I go to the beach.
Okay, I agree with you though, actually. And okay, so let me just put this in context, because so like, most of my life, my working life was spent sort of isolated, because I always worked for a very small company, kind of like a boutique consulting firm as a researcher. My job, like 10 hours a day, consists of like looking at the computer screen, researching, writing things. That's my job, right? So and so I'm kind of slowly like getting to know this world of labor organizing now, because I'm like learning about I have a lot of friends like you now, like who are in the unions, and like so actually this weekend, Saturday, I was at the union event in LA, because I was actually distributing literature about the U.S. Hands Off Cuba
Hmm.
movement. So yeah, I was there, and the point is though, the the whole atmosphere, this like kind of just the feeling of, well, okay, feeling of union, feeling of unity, and like being a family, and like belonging was overwhelming.
Mm.
I because it's just so new to me, that kind of feeling, because again, like for most of my life, I worked and lived in a very isolated environment, almost by choice, really. But so I never had that kind of like group of people coming together, young and old, and
Hmm.
just finding a space that's like they belong, and there's this like strong feeling of like family, you know and that's just so different. So I think coming from this environment of being in a during the COVID, we had to isolate. So we were just super isolated in our own household and
Hmm.
not going out. And then I think we are craving somewhere to belong, not only like a space, like physical space, but like emotionally like belong, and like somewhere we can call our family and our um yeah, so
I'm glad you mentioned that portion, Sukuru, because if most people know, I actually am a practicing student therapist. And one of the theories that I actually practice, I always say I'm an eclectic therapist, but I have a humanistic foundation. And one of the humanistic principles is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that is one of the principles of being able to have a successful life, is having that love and belongingness. And that's the thing. There's a lot of people that don't feel like that they belong, because there's always been like either some form of gatekeeping that's going on, and they just don't feel like they've been like really fully accepted. But then they actually, in a sense, what's really kind of depressing about it, they kind of shut it out, and then they lose that motivation to go seek it. So then the question is like, how do we do that? And I think like with the problem that I see, like mainly like with mainstream media, it's like, yes, they provide us the news, but they only provide us minimal motivation to really like be out there and say, okay, enough is enough. We really need to do something.
I think, I think capitalism thrives when we're isolated. It thrives when we're not having things collective. It thrives. And I think so we're up against a lot. I think this system that is not meant for us to make this easy, like even from the design of our cities to like everything is like literally is to keep us productive and working and making more money for somebody else. And so I think, it requires like some imagination. And for example, I used to be a go-go boy at a bar called Fault Line in East Hollywood. And so I would go out a lot. I still, maybe need to go out, sometimes go out too much. But, I do enjoy, like, for me, like the dance floor has always been like this extra transcendental space for me. It's like, doesn't matter what you do for work, doesn't matter who you're with. There's this very small space where people kind of let go of themselves and it kind of be who they are. And everyone is different. I understand that as well. But a lot of my inspiration comes from I think just knowing that there's such a capacity for us to be joyous together and doing things together, and it feels fleeting at times. And that's why, like, honestly, I joined like a swim team, and I do it for the swimming, but also like because I feel this is my first job I'm doing where I have to work remotely, and I really struggle with spending a lot of time on the computer or on the phone, or procrastinating sometimes and then doing everything. And it's just like it's not. I'm much. This is not my ideal, to be honest, working situation. But I think like having something in real life outside with a group of people once or twice a week for me has been like, I think that provides a whole other thing. I could go talk about how water is really important to me, but I think it's also part of that, just like being part of a group, anything, for me at this point. Yeah, because then you have to, you're gets me out of my own mind also. But yeah, no, I'm glad we're talking about this, because this is real. Like, this is, now we're moved on to like surviving in the 21st century world, which is, yeah, we're all trying to do. We all
Right.
have
And
strategies, yeah.
we got to remember, though, this pandemic has broken a lot of people's brains too, and I think we're starting to see now, like, we're starting to recover a little bit, which is good. I love that progress, though, because we have become so isolated, and we get trapped up in our own thinking, and we end up falling into that trap where we're just closed minded. So I am glad that, like, people are now starting to go out. Actually, I encourage it all the time. It's like, hey, take a break from social media, go out. You need to go out. Because if you focus too much time on social media, it's going to break your brain. But I mean, social media has become a really good platform for activism in general, because that's how things are. We're in a society now, technology kind of rules it all. But I want people to remember, and I hope you both agree with me on this, but I think more of us really need to be more on the ground outside of that social media aspect, because being on the ground is going to speak more volumes as opposed to being online, because anybody can say anything online. Like, they could say, hey, we must stop this, but are you going to actually go out on the street and actually do something? Are you going to join other organizers? Like, what are you going to do? Because for me, it's hard for me to take anybody like that seriously who say they're going to do something, but they don't really demonstrate it. But I think, like, bringing that fun aspect is important, because most of us have experienced like this decline and lack of motivation because we have been pretty much isolated in our homes. But go ahead, Super. I knew you were getting ready to say something.
No, I actually have two things that I want to kind of highlight, but one thing is that though, the internet in general and social media, I mean, people have to remember it's designed to polarize things. So, because I've been a researcher of internet businesses, so I sort of researched in the space like about 2000, ever since 2000. So when if you remember when we started out using the internet, the vision of the internet was like, oh, this is great, because we have like the whole world at our fingertips now. We can find like any information that we want, and that was like, the having access to everything was the vision that we kind of had about the internet, right? But it turned out though, it's not like that actually. It kind of like narrows our mind and narrows our view. If you notice that, because social media actually is really designed to give you the perspective, or give you this sort of like narrow vision of the world that you would like to see. Because like if you think of Twitter, for instance, like you follow people that you like, or you follow things that you are interested in. So everything outside of that won't come to you. And now like we are increasingly lazy that we don't want to go out to find, go out of our bounds to find things, because things come to us, right? So if we only look at things that come to us, like our vision gets narrower and narrower, and we are more likely to hear people, listen to people that agree with us, from the start, already. So it's a actually pretty dangerous, tool that we have, yeah. Um, Go ahead, Billy.
I was gonna say, I just been reading and thinking about it more, since now I'm working, on a campaign against, I'm working with a company, and so I have to look at their social media. I have to like analyze it now, right? So it's like a whole different lens of thinking of it. But even just personally, right, knowing that there's this really interesting book called Elite Capture, and there's I haven't gotten it all down yet, so give me a second. I'm actually just saying it out loud for the first time. But there's this idea that, games are like, humans love games because everything is like a set parameter and we can focus on one thing. It's very like straightforward. So we went into a game world, we're just trying to win the race, like Mario Kart, right? Like that's our complete focus. It completely detaches us, which is great from the rest. The real world is like human relationships are tricky, or like, I don't know if I should say that, or like we have to navigate with unknown rules, right? But in game world, we have like this set of rules. And he kind of uses this author uses this idea, like that's like the system is like capitalism keeps us in this in this game world as well. And I think social media was one aspect where it's like, we're basically making content for all these like social media companies. Like the more likes and engagement that we get, like we are what we decide to post, what we decide to do, everything is now like there's a game aspect to it, right? Like how many likes, or how, and then we start to value which things get more likes than this, and it's like, now I'm like, am I more successful if I said this, or like, should I do more? It's like, who are you? It's really, really a lot. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but I do think it's, yeah, sometimes for all of those reasons, it's good to not
Mhm.
take a
And
break.
I don't want to really kind of go into this actually, but I will, because okay, so let's face this, right? Because for these social media companies, we are their customer, we are their consumer, but also we are their product though,
Mhm.
because everything that we put out actually benefits them, So we are kind of like their free labor almost, because we create contents, and without content they can survive. That's their product, and also like they feed us to their advertisers, right? So like we are in a very very we in many different ways, like we are their product. We are actually like making money for them, which is very ironic when you think about it. So it's kind of um I struggle with that, daily, because like
Mhm.
it's sort of like you can't live without them, but it's like, well, we can't live with them, like, I mean, not all the way. So we kind of have to keep balance, I feel like.
It's a love-hate relationship, just like, like I have a love-hate relationship with TikTok. It's like I love it, but I hate it at the same time. And I'm glad you brought this point up earlier, Sukuru, about like basically the algorithm. Like it's hard. Like, see, I call out like usually transphobia or homophobia any chance I get. And usually the feedback I get is like, hey, like we really appreciate it, but you don't really need to do it. But yes, I do need to do it though, because education is important. So I want to take that chance that maybe if somebody that is not within that algorithm, maybe they may see it, and I'm at least planting a seed.
Mhm.
And social media, it's been very difficult to actually do it because they only limit to people that are actually going to agree with you. Now it's created this attitude. Now it's like, oh, we don't really want to hear your opinion. We only want to hear the people that agree with us. That is the problem.
Mhm.
We need to actually start reaching to those people that are in the middle,
Yeah.
because they do exist.
And in the same vein, another thing is like, what's the quickest take that I can get that's simple enough that makes sense from my worldview? And that's the one I'm going with. And if I see two of my friends post the same thing, it's like really complicated issues boiled down. And it's like, I have to do messaging, and I'm like, oh gosh, this is horrible. Because these are not black and white things. Like the world is complicated. There are lots of contradictions, but we don't have time for contradictions now. We need something like digestible for every time news breaks. We need an answer. It's like, God forbid we just kind of like struggle, like, and think about it, or talk to people about it. And that part of like this hyper speed of like consumption of knowledge, and like just one thing after the other, and like we're bombarded with that,
Yeah.
is not like that deep political education that we'd all like idealize, right? Or where, so I think that's also dangerous. And I think one thing that I've noticed, and just to like bring it all the way around, is these feelings of being isolated on social media, where they're also like, people who are running the social media are also telling you need to buy more things to be happier, you need to look more like this person has this, it's like, no wonder it's hard, and you can feel isolated. It's a very isolating to feel that you're always lacking something. It's like this endless, things that you're lacking. And you could be having a perfectly good day, and then you realize you need all this stuff, or you don't look like this person, or this person is doing, you know what I mean? And it's like, so I think that, yeah, I don't know how we all manage this on our own, but it is truly a feat that we do this every day, and we can like sleep good at night, you know, like, are we okay, really?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like it attacks the.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say they attack the mental health aspect a lot. I mean, that's what I know that you and me discussed this on a episode of the Trans Files, Sukuru, but like with even gender norms, like what makes a perfect woman. Like they attack your confidence, and they don't even realize like the level of damage they could do. Yes, it does like make you go kind of out there in your head, but it also can kill you just to go ahead and conform with what society is telling you to do. And that is dangerous. But go ahead, Sukuru.
I agree with that. I'm kind of taking a conversation into a different domain though, so I apologize. But okay, so listeners, I have to confess. You see, I can't lie, so I have to confess. I goofed in the beginning of this program. So this was like a take two because I forgot to hit the record button. So anyway,
It's Monday.
It's Monday,
the reason
yes.
why I say that though, the reason why I say that is because I want to bring up what Billy was saying when I was not recording. So, because you were talking about, growing up in a military family and on a military base, and how, like how shocking it was to realize that like people outside of the military family and military bases like really had a different reality, from the one that you grew up in, that you experienced. So that was like intriguing to me. So would you kind of go back and talk about that?
For sure. And I think it's good to talk about because, just like there's such a small percentage of military families, and it's that constantly repeats. So like my brother joined the military. It's my dad's dad was in the military. Like it's the same families fight the wars, these big imperialist wars. Like you want to talk about capitalism and all of this stuff, but it's the same families that take the brunt of it. And, army bases, look at where army bases are located, right? Largest one is Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in Fayetteville. It's in places where it's offers somebody a chance to go away and, like see the world, or, have some social mobility, have healthcare, have education, all these things that we are trained not to have or see as a privilege. But anyways, yeah, so I grew up on military bases, and when I was 10 years old was September 11th for me. So that was actually, I get, it's pretty tough to see, every year this whole thing, this never forget, just for me personally, because that was a big marker in my life where within, a year, my mom would be in Kuwait leading the invasion into Iraq. Within 2 years of that, my dad would be in Afghanistan. There where I would be, attending funerals for people on the base who died. And, it was a really, really small military base. So when the whole unit is gone and you hear something on the news, you're waiting, you have dread, I literally grew up, always not knowing what's going to happen, or thinking that my mom was going to die, for this is like long parts of my life. And then my dad as well, so it was, and I had a really strong sense of community with the people there because we were all going through it together. What was the biggest culture shock for me was coming to the States, and nobody cares about the war. Nobody cares about anything. It's like, this was not the news. It's such a mundane thing. It's so far away. And to go from being like, this is my whole life, to being with people who, and this was progressive people, this was conservative people, it was everyone. It was liberal people who vote Democrat, whatever it is. And that was, like really disturbing and really uncomfortable. And I think at the end it was really politicizing. And yeah, when I think about where I get politicized, it's just like growing up like that, and then taking it, the critique. Why is it the same people? Why is it my family that does this? Why is it not? Why is it that nobody cares? We can afford not to care, right? But then I found like community replicated for me when I was organizing in college with other students, and we were organizing on campaigns, in solidarity with garment workers and with workers on our campus. And for me, it was a lot of queer organizers who were organizing labor. And yeah, that's now look at me. That, but you could tell, right? Like that's where I felt like I belonged. And when they made the space for me, and I think all of the little injustices that you face I faced every day, or like my feelings, or like my anger and all this stuff is like, well, when we organize labor, we can take those out on giant corporations and make uncomfortable people, we can, and make people uncomfortable who are not, who are living their lives. And so if we're going to use it, in a way we can organize around it. And it can be fun too, because it's fun to do like wild stuff with your friends to take down bad corporations. Like that should be a fun thing for us.
Right.
So yeah, I guess that's kind of a little bit of how I got where I got. But yeah, queer student organizers who are organizing stuff with labor was a really, really impactful space for me.
Yeah. See, okay, so you really hit the nerve with me with that actually whole story of you growing up, because, and let me just kind of digress and it'll come back
Yeah,
to
please.
the core. But so I grew up in Japan, as you know, and Japan, having been or Japan was an aggressor in the Pacific War. We invaded a lot of countries in Asia, and we lost the war, right? Because we lost the war, and um, we adopted the peace constitution, what we call peace constitution. So under the constitution, Japan did not have or could not have military. We only had a self-defense force, right? So that's like historical background. And so I grew up with this father of mine, my father. He had this like really pathological hate of self-defense force and people who work for self-defense force. And I never figured out why, because my father and I really did not have a conversation growing up. But I kind of figured out why recently, just given like just little bits of pieces of information that I had, about my dad. And I think my dad was a person whose opinion was such that, he wasn't a pacifist. Actually, he was mad at these people because in his eyes, like they were freeloaders. They were not fighting wars. They were just like training whole time. And there was a self-defense force, and like, and they are just like getting free money. So that's like what my father's perspective was. Okay. I, went to a school in Hiroshima where 350 students died on August 6th, 1945. And I kind of became, or I actually became a pacifist in a big way. So I came to the United States when I was 19, and I have a confession to make, but so I was a pacifist, but I was a very, very narrow-minded pacifist because I grew up in Japan. Technically speaking, we couldn't, or we are a country who don't fight in the war, as I was growing up. And I came here, and I had this like very skewed view about military and people who work for military. And I'm confessing. See, um, so yeah, I had this perception that, oh yeah, people who work for military, that's wrong because they are just going out and killing people, right? But then, so when I started out doing like anti-nuclear activism here very actively, about 7-8 years ago, I got to know people, who were veterans for peace, specifically. And I got to talk with a lot of people who were veterans, who fought in the war and really changed my world. I mean, it was just a really, it just shifted my whole perspective because now I knew that, oh my God, these people are the ones like who are the best, actually, greatest advocates for peace because they really knew what it was like to fight in the world and the pain and the contradictions and all of that. That actually I didn't know. I have no idea, and I would probably have like no way of knowing, because I don't have that experience. And they had a lot to teach me, me as a pacifist. And I guess what I'm trying to say though, I kind of like, through that experience, like what I learned was this lack of compassion that we, all of us, to some extent have, is very, very damaging,
Mm,
to us personally, spiritually. But at the same time though, like what you were saying about, being a queer, all of us being a queer, I think we are in the best space to cultivate our compassion, right? I mean,
yeah.
our ability to be compassionate because we've been hurt.
Hmm.
So we should have this like huge amount of compassion, and the ability to be compassionate. So I just believe that as queer, we can be a great force in the world because we have the ability to exercise compassion and reach out to different groups and unite. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Sorry, I just yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
All I'm going to say is I'm very moved. And that's why I was just staying very, very quiet. And that's the thing, too. We all need to practice humility in all arenas.
Mm,
I call this Karen entitlement syndrome, honestly, is when people are just so close minded and just refuse to listen to the other perspective. That's why I don't really believe in like blocking people. Because
mm,
if I can find like a common ground with them, then that's actually a success for me. That's why it actually disheartens me actually when I see members of our own communities going after each other. It's like, but we've been there together. We've been
mm.
oppressed together. We're still getting oppressed. What's going on? Why are you engaging that? And honestly, I think that type of gatekeeping that goes on, it's a distractor. And you've said it always perfectly, Suguru, and I'm going to actually highly emphasize this. Division is by design, okay? Like, please remember your roots. And I've been in that kind of space too, where it's just like I don't know like what the person's been through, and I could be totally nasty towards them. But then when I actually take a minute and just say, okay, you know what, let's try this again, rewind it back, tell me what's going on, share your perspective, and then I end up apologizing later. It's like, okay, well then I'm actually sorry that I said what I said, and we can't be reactionary with it.
Yeah, we'll save the nasty stuff for like evil corporations and billionaires, But
Yes.
amongst us, amongst us, yeah, we have too much to gain, But yeah, no, I can see how it plays out. Um, yeah.
Well, I've been advocating that people should just show up at their houses with horse shit. Like that's what I've been doing. Like just show up at all their houses, just put a whole bunch of horse shit in front of their houses. But that's me. Like that's my way of being fun with it. Like I know it's gross, but it's just like they're throwing all this like fancy stuff right in our faces that it's like, oh well, I wish I had the privilege to be able to get that. Like that. Thank you for like sharing your nice fridge, but like I mean, there's many of us that are on the street struggling right now just to even like survive. So it's just like, why rub that in our face? So I mean, personally, I would get satisfaction if I saw it covered in horseshit, but that's me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think to those points, I think especially working with workers, it's like what do you have to lose? What do I personally have to lose? In my position in the world, and with what I have, and yeah, and I also think Tsukuro, to your point as well, is like I also believe in that compassion, and I think that's why there's more queer organizers in the labor movement disproportionately. I think that there's, because I think that's an important part of organizing is like you have to be feeling something, right? Like there's other jobs for people who don't feel, I guess, but organizing, yeah. So, and I really am interested now, and so it's kind of this project that I'm working on for this campaign to think about, is like how to, get queer folks, queer trans identified folks to think of them, to build that compassion. You can call it compassion or solidarity with workers. I mean, that's literally it. And I think one of the things is like, I think we have, I think some of it's education, right? Because a lot of this labor history, I didn't know until I got a book from the library and checked it out. And I was like, like things I've taken for granted or stuff like that. Like it does take, I think, that part of the effort, but I do think people will respond. And the more that we can turn like, non-political queer events into political queer events where there is some education, where there is some conversations, where there are real issues beyond the immediate, fun that we're having or whatever it is, or the things that we're buying. Like we've all identified, right? Like now's a good time. People are there, it's like fertile ground for this. And like there's no shortage of like problems for queer people to be actively involved with. So I think it is it's a good time for it, and I'm really interested in like kind of just being in this space and thinking about this more, and trying to imagine other things, imagine what it could look like, and aiming high, really high.
Yeah.
I honestly think more people are starting to speak up now. Like TikTok is my go-to app now. I mean, I barely pay attention to Twitter anymore just because Twitter's just, I mean, let's just be real. Twitter is a shit show. I mean, let's just be real. But, with TikTok, like I have been seeing like a lot of people like complain about like what's going on with their jobs. Like I actually stitched a video where this transgender man, like he was denied his jacket. Like they were just willing to let him die, and they say, "Oh, well, we don't give them to transgender people." And people need to realize, like labor unions, like labor rights, that does affect us.
Yeah,
it does. I mean, we need to be out there speaking collectively as one. And, I have been going on the theory and principle that people are just afraid to use their voice because we have been told for many years, it's like, we'll toss you a crumb here just so you guys can just shut the fuck up and not make a stink. But like, we need to come to a point now, like that's no longer going to be acceptable anymore.
Well, I think at least for labor right now, and I think what we're seeing, just observation and also talking to people, is like, there is, like the Starbucks workers are definitely feeling, a lot of them are feeling pretty empowered to speak up because one, like it's the time we're in, but two, it's like, okay, if I get fired, I'll find another job. And like, honestly, that was not the case before the pandemic. Maybe, there was, just the way the economy is right now has given us a leverage. I think it's up to a lot of organizers to really push the labor movement to like be really, really like not let this go, this like once in a historical time period where we can really make big gains and do big things. But it is always scary. It's always scary to speak up at your workplace. I remember speaking up at a staff meeting and my voice quivering and my whole body shaking. It's funny now, but man, it is always scary to speak up to any kind of management and boss and all this stuff. And, that's the principle of the union, right? Is that you do things together and you're not alone and all of this stuff. And so, I go back to that Spanish nurse and like, people looking to belong, not necessarily with unions, but in places and spaces where they can also speak up as well.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it is like fear is real though, in at workplaces, like where when you're faced with real possibility of being fired or put in a place like where you will never get promoted, which I was in. I mean, it just really does like psychologically like does numbers on you. It's anyway, it's kind of like abuse, being in an abusive relationship, almost like.
And there's nothing when I would be with nurses, right, or they're organizing all this stuff and encouraging them, you should speak up, da 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 da. Me telling somebody don't be scared is not going to make them any less scared, right? Like fear is still there.
Right.
Fear is what whenever like these unions are not winning, it's because people get scared, right? And they don't want to speak up, they don't want to vote, they won't want, they're scared of all of this stuff. But the only way that I found, and I'd be interested if you all have any others, is like I get less scared when I see somebody else do something. It's like something is like the chain reaction, right? Or we do it together. That makes it less scary. And there's this overcoming this fear and doing things that are scary is like such a important part of this or of all this organizing that's happening right now. And I think it's just like exciting that people are going through this process. Like in the rest of your life, when do you decide like, hey, I deserve this, or like, hey, I want to say that I should have this amount of pay, or I should decide something about my own life? The rest of our lives, we are not unfortunately able to do that in the city we live in. We can't just make demands like this. But the dignity that you get when you say like, look, I deserve this, or I think I should have a say in what my workload should be, stuff like that is like really flips the script for people. I do want yeah, I think I want labor to push it, do not lose this moment either, because it's not always like this. It was not like this a couple of years ago organizing, and I think now we're just seeing people go through this process all together. It's really exciting.
Well, not to mention the rich, like you stated earlier, the rich are getting richer. They're not
Yeah.
losing any money. I mean, for me personally, that was enough to piss me off to say, okay, no, this can't continue. But like, I do like that approach though. There needs to be some form of like modeling, and then that way it becomes a chain reaction. Like I've noticed that even with our event with October 1st, people are starting to see it now. Like people, because we're promoting it like crazy. It's like, y'all, this is important. It's like, yes, lives are being lost, but we need to think about this. People already see us as species like we're not even human beings. And I've always made a point, it's like we are human beings. We do deserve to have those rights. We deserve to be able to go to work without getting discriminated against. We do have the right to actually get paid a fair wage, a living wage. Like we do deserve that. And like having that chain reaction is very powerful. It's very effective. And I actually encourage more people to do it. Because I think the problem is, like, again, I think it's the fear thing. Yes, I think having fear is okay, but I don't think it should be to a point where it actually consumes you fully, to the point where you just don't want to fight.
Yeah, I think when you start demanding more for yourself at work, you by nature demand it outside of work too. Like there's a reaction in speaking up in one area of your life that you've been told is already set. And then you start to look at the rest of the things in your life and this democracy we live in, all these other things you have to do. And you're like, I don't know about that either. But it's like, I think work is such this pivotal place where we have this opening to say that this is like, I have an idea about this and I think it's important. I think we should do something about it. And it's not fair that this one person dictates. We love democracy except at work. Like, what is that about? This whole 1/3 of my life, I don't have any, this thing that determines everything else. I have no democracy, but we love freedom and all of this stuff. So all those questions are good. And I think they're, it's just, that's why I think it's a good time to be doing the both of the organizing, right? And connecting those things, because work is a real place. And I think especially for, states where you can be fired because of your gender identity, because of all of these different things, though, in those states, what will save you is a union contract. What is putting that in writing between you and your employer. Those are like really basic things. Like I can't be fired for being who I am. And this is not new, right? Like in 1978, when we had the Briggs Amendment in California, which was, I don't know if you all know, but it was the moral majority time. This was like Ronald Reagan time, and when he was governor. And the idea was that, if, basically to not have gay and lesbian teachers. And what was it? It was the fear, right? Same thing that we hear. The discourse is the same. It's grooming. It's all of this stuff. It's this idea that you don't want these people around your kids. We already fought that battle, back then. And so it's like they keep on recycling these things. It's all about save the children, save the kids, all of this stuff. And it was, like teachers unions played a really big role in fighting that back. And so I think the more, it's because they have queer leaders among their ranks. And so it's like these things like have different ways to come back and forth to each other. Yeah, it's just like imagining them and looking for them always.
I'm glad you mentioned that, actually. See, I work in mental health, and that field, honestly, like, I'm actually disappointed, and I'm getting to a point where I'm about to say I'm ashamed of it. Because mental health is a fundamental need. We all need to have it. It should be accessible. Like, I mean, actually, it should be free. Nobody should be paying, like, what is it, like $150 to maybe $300 an hour just to see a fucking therapist. But, like, I was doing an internship for school, and I actually did get fired because of my gender identity and my orientation scared people. I couldn't go after them because they weren't paying me. I got no justice whatsoever. I know I'm not alone in that, but like I wanted, like, the thing is too, like I have heard other trans people like complain about this. It's like we need to have more LGBTQ therapists in there. It's like, but you wonder why they're not really, like, is a lot of them, because we're not really being accepted. The face value that it paints. Oh, we're very inclusive. We definitely would love to have you all on board. But then once you actually get in the door, that's when the evil happens. And people don't really talk about that shit at all. And I think it's very important that we need to be united and say, hey, like, you shouldn't have to even, nobody should be afraid to actually stand up for themselves at work. And I actually can relate to that too. Because like when I first came out as trans, like I was very scared about using my voice because I had the idea, it's like, oh, well, it's just not going to get heard anyway. Yeah, I have had that happen. However, it's still worth going for, like, because you are a human being. You have basic rights. You need to fight for them. That's why it doesn't scare me anymore. Yeah, I may have battles I'll lose, but at the end of the day, I'm going to pat myself on the back because I used my voice. And obviously, if they're going to get rid of me, obviously, like, I'm hitting a nerve and I'm scaring them. So, I mean,
right. That point you made, though, you said we don't talk about is, this very surface level marketing by corporations to have like their token trans person, their token whatever, like it's basically standard business practice now to have that inclusion on the surface, right? And it's like this thing with Starbucks, they're actually wielding it in this weird way where they're saying we're a great employer, we provide this, trans healthcare, but you may not have it if you organize a union, right? So, but I think that there's a very real threat when companies are able to take advantage of these like token small things and these surface level things and just like representation, we're good to go, like doesn't matter anything else, and use that as a marketing thing, because I think people are gullible because we want nice things. Like it does, like for example, I remember when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, and now gays can join the military. It's like, wait a second, I don't want gays joining the military. You know what I mean? It's like there's but for some people, I can also feel at the same time it's very emotional. It's like, look, you're included, you know this thing. Like, don't deny that is a very emotional thing for people to see representation. But man, I feel like this like investigation a little bit more into corporations and their corporate social responsibility, which is just a marketing tool. And I think that queer people are especially like have to be at the forefront of saying no, like this is not okay. You cannot, it does, if it's a queer person who is stealing wages from workers, it's a problem. It's not, I don't feel represented at all. And there's queer workers who are getting stolen from. Let's talk about that. You know what I mean? So I think that's just where my mind is at. As you said, it's not something we always talk about, but these very, very surface friendly things, and then the actual practices are not there. So I think that's the danger of like this representation. Sometimes we're so easy, we just want something, and I get it because I can feel emotional about things too, but to be really critical of these corporations and know that at the end of the day, somebody's making tons of money who's living very comfortably, who doesn't care about you at all, like, to be honest, right? They're just seeing this as a tool.
Yeah. For the most part, it's, but I mean, how the world has gotten though. I mean, what's disappointing is that it became so easy for corporations to kind of check boxes,
Mm.
because there are such things as like social responsibility, consultant and stuff like that, who can advise you like what to do exactly to look good. So you may not really, inside your organization, you may not be really practicing it, but from the outside, you can kind of easily look like you are doing something. So that's what's disappointing, I think. But
But by definition, that's performative allyship, right?
Mhm.
Because they're basically promoting the idea. It's like, hey, we're a friendly place. But then when you get inside closed doors, that's not what it really is. That's what I said. Performative allyship kills people mentally, mainly.
I think performative allyship in a corporate model is extremely dangerous, and I think just studying Adidas is like the best at this. If you go on anything, they have their Pride Month thing ready to go. They're always looking for like these intersectionally like marginalized whatever identity people and putting a spotlight on them, and it makes you feel good. Like you have to check yourself because you're like, wait a second, it is great that there's a queer soccer player like who's out, like you want that because you've experienced, but wait a second, these same people this is a tool for them to profit off. Their whole board, all their presidents are straight dudes who live in Germany. Like you have to like bring it back to like all of this stuff that they're putting out is marketing, and we are the only people fit to call out stuff like that. And I think that part of using our voice has to be just as strong as Tom Daly talking about his whatever thing. And I'm like, I kind of want to be like, sorry, like it's great that you're an Olympic diver and you're out. I have a lot less, until these workers get paid and until Adidas sits down and negotiates with the unions. Like I don't feel that much. I'm sorry, like we have to go back. Like the world is like this wildly unequal place, like Pakistan and Puerto Rico right now, and we're all watching like the Queen, funeral. Like these are really visceral, wild things that we're going through every day, and like remembering that we should be working with the people, who have a lot more to win by organizing with, and materially, especially. I think garment workers are. This has been the race to the bottom, and they organize across borders, and they're like, some of the most militant workers. And we have to juxtapose that with the Tom Daly, who's very comfortable in London, and like your Adidas contract means less. So yeah, it's a complicated world and all those things. And I think there's one other thing that I just feel is really dangerous about it is that I do feel like these corporations, it's turning activism into something that's like way too easy. So for example, Adidas has like the anti-racist reading list on one of their posts, or like learn about how refugees happen. Like all of these things, like here's a way that our shoes help the ocean, like in climate change. All of these things, for us, maybe we see through it, right? But for other people who are, maybe more just clicking things, it's like, do you want people to learn about the refugee crisis from a corporation? Do you want to learn an anti-racist reading list from a German corporation founded by a guy named Adolf Dassler, whose board is all completely, German dudes? It's so distorted. And I think that front-facing thing is like, oh, they sponsored Beyonce and Bad Bunny, all these fun stuff. But there's something very insidious about the marketing and the co-opting of social movements, because instead of like organizing or joining a more radical organization, you're here and you're like, oh, I did the thing. I clicked on the thing, I read the thing. Adidas told me what to do. Now I'm an activist. Like, I think that actually is dangerous. And I think that we should also be steering people away from recognizing that corporations should not have any. Corporations who have a vested interest in maintaining, profits should not be the ones dictating to people or helping them at all learn about organizing or politics or anything like that. That's my takeaway from it.
I agree with that. I know we're getting close to time, so we wanted to provide this opportunity for you. If there's something that you would like to promote and just share some words of encouragement, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, let me see. So maybe I'll send a link. But obviously, I'm working on this campaign, and I do feel that it's a really big opportunity to reimagine like what queer power can look like, queer and power um, power that's working in solidarity with workers, and in this environment right now. Um, and like I said earlier, right? Like I want us to think about just a different role. I guess a different role, and I think there's just so much potential. So it's exciting to me. This has drawn me to read more. It's drawn me to think about things a little bit differently. So there's going to be some campaign stuff about that I'll eventually send out. But we're having a global week of action. The end of October in Los Angeles. Our action will be on the 29th, and we're going to be doing actions in LA at an Adidas store at the same time where you're going to be having actions in Pakistan and Indonesia and Cambodia. And we're, uniting the workers, and hopefully we're uniting the queers as well to stand up with workers. And I'm really interested in queer labor history. And I think, maybe one of the ways to think about this is that corporations right now are cashing in on the pink dollar, whatever we want to call it. They're cashing in on our identities. They are using all of these things now that it's trendy, when it wasn't 10 years ago, when it wasn't 20 years ago, when it wasn't 30 years, when it wasn't 40. Unions are not perfect. There's been a lot of problems within unions. They're human organizations. They have a lot of the similar problems. But through democratic run unions, you have had, the first anti-discrimination things for jobs, anti-discrimination clauses. You had domestic partner benefits for the first time happen. These are places where workers and queer workers especially have so much to win. And I want us to think about what can we do to support unions in other countries that are fighting right now? And that's just the question I want us to be thinking about. Unions that, we are living in the legacy of a lot of things that people did before us who fought. And now we are in a different position, but we should never leave that. And so it's what can we do to support the workers that are organizing now? And especially if they're going to be organizing against a company that literally just likes to profit off of our identity in the first place. So that's my closing thoughts. that's
a powerful one. Sugru, did you have one?
I mean, yes and no, because that was really powerful, and I just want to, thank you. And I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, but I think, I mean, okay, so if I can say something really, in a very short manner, I am like you, Billy. I think I am very optimistic, even though there are complexities, in this world, and there are a lot of issues, like hard issues that we have to tackle. I think I feel like we are coming to the moment, based on the fact that we are all struggling, and we all have, we as a working people, have real issues that we, in our life that's really threatening to us, putting such as putting food on the table, or just having a place to live. We at the point, a lot of people are struggling with basic needs. And I always say that, people like me, um Asian, immigrant, transgender person, maybe world apart from some white guy, in the Midwest. Sorry about the stereotype, but working in a
Hey,
factory.
I'm transit from the Midwest here. Okay.
I know. But no. My point is, I have this dream. If I can have a conversation with this guy who may be really, world apart from me, but I think when we get down to it, our issues are really not that different, or our needs are not that different. So, I think we can come together based on the fact that we struggle with the same thing. We want the best future for our kids,
Mm-hmm.
and I think if we can agree on that, even though we are so different, I think we can change the world. That's like that's my dream. That's what I believe.
I totally agree with that. I always say you're a powerhouse, Sukuru. So I know, like the more voices, the better. What my closing thoughts though are, I'm just gonna say, just please do not be afraid to use your voice. Please do not be afraid, and this is something that's highly emphasized on this network. Please do not be afraid to engage in uncomfortable conversations. They need to be had. Please stop having the performative conversations. They're not going to get you anywhere because we're still going to be at square one. Okay. The time to use your voice is now. I know it's a very scary world out there, and I know most people are afraid. But please, I encourage you all, join us. Join labor movements. And please, and I just wanted to go ahead and just advertise this here, but please, everyone, join us on October 1st because this is very critical right now. Our lives are at risks. And on top of that, like labor rights are actually getting threatened to us. So we need to be in solidarity with each other right now. Don't gatekeep. Don't point out the flaws. Just join us.
Yeah.
We all should have a universal agreement. Human rights are human rights. That's it.
I agree. And I just want to say, at this is the time, I think, especially, for me as like a cis gay man, when we had the monkeypox scare, right? Or still having the monkeypox scare, it was flashbacks, right? It's like we have to organize. It's like, where are we getting the resources? Who are we talking to? All of this stuff, right? We're among me and my friends, and when it was trans folks under attack, where were we? And we have a chance. I think October 1st is a time to be together and say that all of, this whole system there's a lot of problems here, and like, we're going to take this on together. And I think at a time when, in the world when things are getting more policed, when there's more and more restrictions on freedom of speech, the most important thing to do is show up and do it in an action. So I'm really excited to be there on the 1st because I think it's critical and people don't know, this is for them too. This is for people who don't even know everything that, we have. Gay men, I would say, especially, because trans folks did it first and they did it loud and they were unapologetic, we're the recipients of it. And I feel like this is a really critical time when we can show up. So yeah, I'm excited to be there. And yeah, thank you all for just letting me talk and ramble and kind of think some things through. And I have more things to think about now.
Oh yes, that this is like the whole design of the show is everybody could just talk with whatever they feel like they want to talk about. But on that note, I just want to encourage everybody to please like, share, and subscribe. And please, again, join us on October 1st, and we will see you all soon. And we will be back in recording actually the 4th of October, I believe. So we will have a new Up Close and Personal at that point. So solidarity with everyone. Please take care of yourselves.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.